Hello, welcome to another episode of Webcam Sessions. This week we're going to talk about the 3 E's of learning and this sort of 70-20-10% method of learning and how we can relate it to the ukulele. Now this method I don't know as much about as I'd like to, but I've been really fortunate to have had students that actually work as learning professionals, you know who you are, and have given me so much in the way of information to be able to learn how to become a better teacher. And one of the things that's come up many times is this 3 E's of learning, or experience, exposure, and education. And so I want to talk about what these 3 E's are and how they specifically relate to the ukulele to help maximize your efficiency of learning the instrument. Because I think that a lot of people sort of have their priorities a little bit off to be able to, again, maximize the effectiveness of their practice and the time that they spend with the instrument. So to start talking about this, let's talk about what each one of these E's mean. And we'll start with education. Education is the act of learning something new, essentially. So anytime you buy a new course, whether it be the strumming course I did on Ukulele Underground, or anything else with Ukulele Underground when it comes to song tutorials or any of their Ukulele 101 or 102 classes, it could be new books. You might have bought whatever new book is out. There's a lot of great books out there. James Hill's got a new one too that's really cool. But, or, you know, video courses, books, go to a workshop, whatever else. Those are going to be examples of education, which is essentially when you're presented some new information that at the moment of learning, you're kind of expected to just initially process to understand the concept that's being taught. So that's education. That's the, you go to a class type of side. The next thing there is experience. And experience is going to be the act of practicing whatever it is you learned sort of in that education. So we can think of experience as practice. And it's really important to maximize our practice time, because if we're only trying to absorb new information and never really apply it, we never really go anywhere. And this is where a lot of ukulele players hit a wall, is they try to buy too many books and buy too many things instead of just focusing on one thing and practicing it to the point where they get more comfortable with it. One of the issues is a lot of material out there on the web isn't very well put together at times, which can lead to difficulty knowing what to practice, which is a whole nother thing. But experience is practice. And the last E is exposure. And exposure is essentially kind of the social element, but in this particular case, it's really the ability for a teacher and a student to work together and to get one-on-one direct input on whatever it is they've been practicing. So you can think of exposure sort of as like private lessons, right? Which I've been very fortunate to have been doing now for a number of years. Love teaching lessons. I just did the math and I just hit my 5,000th private lesson over the last however many years I've been doing it. So really, really cool. But anyways, exposure, that act of getting feedback is really what it's about. And it's being able to present what you essentially learned in the education side and then practice in the experience side. The exposure side is where you will tweak what you've been practicing to maximize that efficiency. Maybe one finger's off just a little bit, or maybe you're using a finger a little bit incorrectly, or a timing is off. That's where working with another person in that more one-on-one setting can be so beneficial. And I teach private lessons. You can check out my information below. And Ukulele Underground also does office hours for this reason, where you can actually have one-on-one time with teachers at Ukulele Underground. And if you want more information with that, please check out the link below. But that exposure side of it is something that people oftentimes just never get. You might be living in an area where there are no other ukulele players and you're just learning online. And while you can get the education and the experience, that exposure, the ability to get feedback on what you're working on, might be lacking. And now what I want to talk about with this is sort of the percentage breakdown based on other people's analysis of these 3 E's, what the perfect numbers are for time spent. And it's a 70-20-10 in terms of percentages, where 70% is spent with experience, which is practice, right? So 70% of your time with the ukulele should be spent practicing, playing through things, and making sure that you're actually playing the ukulele, not just watching something. About 20% of your time with the instrument, ideally, would be spent with that exposure in mind. And it's not just with a teacher. It can be with friends that play the instrument. It could be at a uke club or anything like that. But the opportunity to essentially show what you've been practicing, to be able to then get feedback and see how other people might approach it, right? And that's where a private teacher can be really nice, or even just a buddy that plays as well. And then the 10%, is education. And that's the act of essentially getting something new to work on. Now the difficulty there is you can't start with the 70 and move the other way, right? Because the best thing that you can do is start with education, spend time to be able to find what you want to work on, then go to the experience and spend most of your time there, and then get the exposure on it. So the way that I like to think of it, even though it's a 70-20-10 system, is go 10-70-20, right? Where you're spending 10% of your time looking at something new. So maybe it's one of the tutorials that we've worked on here, like Silent Night or the Christmas song, which we did last week, or one of Ukulele Underground's lessons, and spend some time learning the initial parts of the song, then spend a lot of time working on it, just practicing it, playing it through, getting those reps in, not worrying too much about, if you're not doing enough, right? A lot of people get into this mindset where, oh, I gotta be practicing a lot of different things because there's so many books or whatever, right? The best thing you can do is focus on that one thing for a little bit, get it comfortable, and then get some exposure on it, being able to get feedback from other people as you're working through it. And so these 3 E's are used in business all the time. I've done a lot of Googling with it and looking in terms of what people think of it. And I think that's really applicable to the ukulele and specifically our practice habits, and making sure that we're spending the right time on the right things can really help maximize our practice. And if nothing else, the big message with this video is, it's important to curate some stuff that you want to work on from the education standpoint in terms of books and videos and everything. But it's easy to get overwhelmed because you've looked at too much stuff. And sometimes the stuff that you look at isn't the best, which is unfortunate, but just part of this boom of ukulele, right? And so what I would recommend is finding, 1 or 2 things that you enjoy and spending most of your time practicing that as opposed to finding more information. The course that I did for Ukulele Underground, the Ultimate Ukulele Strumming course, was built with these 3 E's in mind. Really, the way that I hope that course would work is when people start working through it, they get the education side, and then within the course there's sort of play-alongs for the experience side, so it can be structured practice. And then the hope is that you might want to take a lesson someday, whether with me or even just signing up on Ukulele Underground and doing their office hours to get that exposure and feedback on what you've been playing. So this is a big tangent, but again, it's something I love thinking about and trying to maximize learning habits. And so if you have any methods that you love when it comes to learning ukulele or learning in general, feel free to leave them in the comment below. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask them down below, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of Webcam Sessions. Thanks so much.